Okay, so just looking at this Facebook post here from Olga. Further explanation on this is what she wanted, just expanding here, was basically a recipe post type where you could change the portion amount and it'll calculate the ingredients based on the portions. So if I've interpreted this correctly, I've made up a demo. It's using Crockoblock's JetEngine with the JetEngine's custom post types. We're also then using Elementor's template system for a single post type for the recipe. And on top of that, we've got a bit of PHP and a snippet which echoes out a repeater to a variable in JavaScript, and we've got some JavaScript that uses that to change values. So the end result is something like this. Don't worry about styling too much. I'm just looking at a single post where I've got a favorite image or featured image, got a table where this is pulled from a repeater, and then if we change the portions, you can see the amount changes up here. So I click on up or down, or I type in 2 there, these numbers change. So if I understand correctly, that's what Olga was wanting to achieve. So firstly, what I'm going to do is pop over to a snippet that I've created. Now I'll put links to all this in the description of the video. And what I'm wanting to do here is create a shortcode that will echo out the repeater values as a variable in JavaScript. So if we come back over to here and I have a look at this page, grab that of ours. Okay, so effectively what that little snippet does is it echoes out a script which sets a constant of this variable name to be an object which contains all of the items from the repeater. We'll use that for the JavaScript to change those values. Let's go back to the actual post types here. So I've created a single post type in JetEngine called recipe. The only thing I've done in the settings is I've added the thumbnail for the featured image. And down in the meta fields, I've added a single meta field, which I've called ingredients per portion. And I've made that a repeater. And I've given it a name, an amount, and units. That's all we need for the custom post type. We head over to one of the actual recipes that we've created. I've only just done the one, by the way. Have a look at this recipe. So basically we've got a title, some body content if we want to use that. We've got featured image which I've added, and here's our JetEngine meta field with the repeater. So at the moment I've got chicken pieces of 2 units of each. I've got eggs of 1 units of each, coconut cream 100 grams. Let's add another one. So I'll add, say for example, we'll call this I don't know, what would you stick in a chicken dish? Say basil, 1, I don't know, we'll call that a leaf. Grams, ounces, whatever you're going to use. So update that. So now we've got one recipe for chicken, which has got these 4 fields I put in the repeater. So if I view that post, there's our 4 fields. If I press up on there, I've got now 2 basil leaves, 200 grams of coconut cream, 2 eggs, 4 chicken pieces. So there we go. So it's as simple as doing that for our recipe. All right, so heading back over to our snippet. So what our snippet does, it's a typical WordPress shortcode where we set some defaults. So we're going to call a variable name, which will be the name that our JavaScript variable gets. This is the default. If you're going to use multiple of these on a page, you would actually pass in your shortcode you would pass in a different name for the variable. The repeater field key, which would be our, back to our plugins, sorry, our JetEngine post types is our recipe. So our key is ingredient dash per dash portion. So we would add a repeater in our repeater key in our shortcode. We pass in a post ID, we'll get the values for that post. If we don't, we're just using some properties down here in a conditional. If there's a post ID, set our post ID to whatever we've put in the shortcode. If not, get the current post ID from wherever we are in the current loop. That's pretty straightforward. So either provide a post ID or get the current loop ID. If we don't provide a repeater field key because there's nothing we can get, just return an error to say there's no repeater field key. Simple as that. What we're then doing is using some code to get the post meta for that post ID. We're looking for that repeater field key we've specified, and we're telling it it's a single value. We then get a var name, which is the variable name that we've given this. We convert our metadata into a JSON string. I've got bug foo here. I'm going to show you how that works as well. And then we're echoing out, sorry, not we're echoing out, with the shortcodes we return a string that we want echoed out. That's so that it can run additional shortcodes and other filters, etc. So we're just basically setting a script tag out, constant, our variable name equals the JSON encoded string of our repeaters. Okay, very simple so far. I'm going to comment out this bug foo here and show you what that does. That's a plugin that you install. You're trying to work out, you're not sure what you're going to get back from anything here. You can echo it out to the console from PHP. I'll show you how that works. If I save changes there, go to my front end here, and here's my bug foo. If I do a F5, so my bug foo here, basically it tells me where it was run from. So it's run from snippets, and this is what it's echoed out. So that's what the JSON string here is equal. So that's the meta value that I've got from that repeater field key. So it gives you an idea of what's going to be echoed out to the console. All right, so let's just switch that back off. Bug foo is great because if you're working with PHP snippets, you don't have to var dump to the screen, you don't have to write out the files, use bug foo, and it turns it in the console of your dev tools, just the same way echoing out through console.log would with JavaScript. So that's pretty much it. Now let's have a look at the front end here. So it's hard to see because some of these aren't filled. So basically we've got our featured image. I'm using containers, by the way, for this. It's just the experimental feature in the current version of Elementor. I love the idea, so I'm just playing around with it. So I'm using containers rather than sections and columns. So we have a typical dynamic repeater that we put on the screen, and the source is our ingredients per portion. So that is from here when we created that meta there. So it's ingredients per portion. The format we want is table data or TDs. We want the name, the amount, and the units. So we go over to here. We got there. In our repeater, we got a name, amount, and units in our repeater fields. It's pretty straightforward so far. All right. Now, we put each of these into a TD. It's because we want to create a table. So what we're going to do is say each item starts with a TR. It was wrapped in a TR, so that's a table row. We're going to put up a for markup. We're going to tell it we've got a table with the T head being these values here with THs. And we're going to end that with ending the table head. Sorry, that's actually wrong. That shouldn't have actually worked. I'm going to end the T head here. So what we want is a table, T head, our headers, end of the T head. we should actually, for this semantically to be correct, I should actually have T body. And then before the end of the table, have another closing the T body. For some reason, this is going a little slow. Okay, so that is the correct markup. So we're going to get a table open. We're going to get a T head with our headers. We're then going to get a T body. And then in between the T body and the closing of that T body, we're going to get TRs with these. I'm just going to double check I haven't broken that. Oops, I've put something incorrectly in there. What have I got? There we go, got an extra there. Still got that. Okay, now it's gone. Looks like I haven't saved my snippet. I thought I saved that. I'm going to have to change it, so I don't want this to go out to bug foo. There we go. So we don't have anything going out to bug foo. We've got a proper head, proper body with our options in there. I change my portions, everything's changing as it should. All right, so back to here, we've got that. We've got a shortcode. So this is the shortcode I've created, the CB underscore repeater underscore 2 underscore JS underscore var. So that is this shortcode here. We've told it the var name we want is CB repeater vars, and the repeater field ID is ingredients per portion, which is this key here. All right, so that's going to go and get the metadata for ingredients per portion. It's going to encode that as a JSON string, and it's going to echo that out to the HTML as a JavaScript constant. So we have that now. All right, so that's the first part of it. Now we've got everything we need. Now we're going to go to the HTML box here. So in this HTML box, all I've done, is create a portions label and a portions input, which is a type of number. Set the display to inline block and the width to auto so that this doesn't go full width by default. So these are nice and in line. Now, WPG portions, the ID of this we're going to use in our script. So that's important. Declaring some variables here. So we're going to use $for jQuery. Dollar portion input would be our jQuery reference to this input. Dollar amount cells. Let's just go back to the dynamic repeater. So what I've done is I've put a class on the amount cells called underscore repeater underscore amount, so I can get a jQuery collection of those. So we're going to get a jQuery collection of that. The repeater array is we want to get those values from the repeater from what we echoed out to the HTML. So the first thing we're going to do is say our selector for our portions is hash portions, which means an ID of portions. The amounts display selector is the hash ingredients table, and then the class or dot repeater underscore amount. So that was the repeater underscore amount. And on this dynamic repeater, if we look at the advanced here, I've set the ID of that to ingredients table. We want to look at the ID of ingredients table and then all of the repeater amount, which is applied to the TDs under that. Okay, so that's our variables and constants. We then wait for the DOM content loaded so that we can get access to jQuery. I've put out a little console info to say that we're initialized. This is just for debugging. You can get rid of that when you want to. Assign $to jQuery. We want to get a repeater array. Now, if we look at the values that's here, this is the shortcode as output. It's an object with item 0 has an object, item 1 has an object, item 2 has an object. All we want is an array of these objects here. So array 0 should be that, 2 should be this, 3, etc. So the way we do that is by getting the object values. So I've gone repeater arrays, the object values of the CB repeater vars. Okay, CB repeater vars is this constant that was output from the shortcode. Okay, hopefully following that. Right, so now we've got an array, indexed array from 0 through to whatever number of values we've got in there, and all we've got is the objects, which are these objects here. So we've got name, amount, and units. Here would be object, that would be the index 0, name, amount, units would be index number 1, etc. Okay, so now we've got that. We're now getting a jQuery reference to the portion input, our input up here, and we're saying on change of that input, we want to update the amounts. Okay, we then also want to get the amount cell, so jQuery collection of the amount cells based on the selector which we've defined up here. Okay. All right, now whenever this portions changes, it's going to call this function. It's going to get a value from the portion input, so whatever number that's on, so 1, 2, 3, etc. Going to get the value of that, and that's the value of our selected portion. Now we don't want that to go less than 1 because you can't have 0 portions or negative portions. So if we hit the down button or put in a negative number or 0, it's less than 1, set it back to 1 and set the selected portion to 1. Simple? Okay. Now because that's 1 based and our index is 0 based, we want to get our index as our selected portion minus 1. So if that's on 1, we want index at 0. Okay. So then from that, we can get the row, which would be the repeater array index. So again, that would be 0. So the repeater array would be this one is 0. This one is 1. So if the portion is on 1, we want to get this object here. Portion is on 2, we want to get this object here. Okay, so we've got that. We want to then go through each of the amount cells. So that would be each of these. And we want to iterate through those. We're using the jQuery each to iterate. I think it's a great way to iterate. For JavaScript purists, you could use for each and iterate through it that way, or for in, whatever you like. I like this way of doing it. We then get a jQuery reference to the TD that we're on. And we set the text, which is the inner text of that TD, to whatever the repeater array open bracket I, so whatever repeater bracket open brackets the I as it's iterating through, to dot amount. So that would be, in this case, it would be for 0, the amount is 2. The next one is amount is 1. Next one is amount is 100. We want to then multiply that by the portion input value. Okay. We've actually got, see, we can use that selected portion here, sorry. We don't need to do that. Again, let's make that simple. So times the portion, selected portion. Let's just update that, make sure that still works as we expect it. Okay, so we're on 1 there, 2, yep, so that multiplied by 2. Watch, the eggs is on 2. If we go to 3, it's 3 eggs, 6 chicken pieces. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So it iterates through each of those cells, gets the actual value from these objects here, and then it updates the TD, whichever TD is, with the amount times whatever the selected portions are. So that is a combination of my whoops, where are we? So a shortcode, so a typical dynamic repeater, where are we? Where we're outputting a table. We're setting a class on our value that we want to change for the amount, setting a ID on that table so we know which table to target. So it's all of the amounts within that table. We then have a shortcode which outputs the repeater's stored values as a JavaScript constant on the window object so that we can access that with jQuery. We then have some HTML here, which we've got a input in with an ID. Then we've got some jQuery and other JavaScript here to listen for those changes, pull the repeater values from that JavaScript output from the shortcode, and apply them to each row. So hopefully that makes sense and has some good value, and I'm sure that this can be used in different ways, but that's one way of doing it. Now, one thing I also want to say at the end of this is I have started a campaign where I have affiliate links now, which I never had before, to Crockoblock, Elementor, WP Rocket, and Dynamicooo, which are the main plugins that I use. And from this day forwards, till no longer needed, every dollar that I earn from those affiliate links will be donated back to the Ukraine to help them in their efforts. So I think it's a very worthy cause. If you need any of those plugins, please use the affiliate links below and purchase those plugins via that. And my promise is that every dollar that comes out of that will be donated back to the Ukraine. So thank you, and I hope this has good value for you.